Hey everyone, and welcome to my new video where we are setting up my bullet journal for August. And this is actually the first theme in my new journal, which I'm very excited to start using. If you haven't seen my new bullet journal setup video yet, definitely check that out, and I will link it in the end screen so you can watch that after this video. I'm using a journal from Notebook Therapy, and this is actually the original size, which is slightly smaller than the A5 journals I've used before, and I really like this size so far. I did a little size comparison in the beginning of my previous video if you are interested, and I think the biggest difference is that this journal has less pages, which is great for me because the A5 had too many pages for me to switch my journal twice a year, and too little pages to fit the whole year in one notebook. Anyway, let's talk a little bit about my theme for August. If you've been watching my previous videos or following me on Instagram, you probably know that I've been obsessed with crocheting for the last couple of months, and I really wanted to do some kind of crochet theme, but I felt like that was a bit too autumnal for July, so I decided to make it for August instead. I had a bit of a difficult time coming up with the cover page because I wasn't sure how I would execute my idea. I could have drawn some crochet patterns, I guess, but that felt a bit too complicated, so I ended up with this kind of flat lay design in the center of the page, and I also decided to add some flowers around it. I'm not sure what kind of flowers these are because I wasn't looking at any reference photos, but I was trying to go for sunflowers as I felt like they suit the month of August really well. August is like a transition month from summer to autumn here in Finland, so I wanted my theme to fit that vibe, and I think it ended up working quite well. Drawing this cover page took a really long time though. Because there were so many details, and I also used fineliners in 3 different sizes, I think, so the line art would have more depth. If you are curious about the supplies I'm using, by the way, I have listed them in the description, so definitely check that out. For the flat lay, I wanted to go for this kind of crocheting in a cafe vibe. So I drew a basket filled with yarn and crochet supplies, and also a piece of pie and a cup of tea or coffee. On the bottom right corner I drew a bag that was inspired by a bag I finished a couple of weeks ago, and I know putting a bag on top of a table is probably not the best idea. But this is just an illustration, so I could do whatever I wanted, and the bag was perfect for the corner. I haven't used the actual bag yet because I still have to add a lining into it so things don't fall out from the tiny holes it has, and this also prevents it from stretching out. Anyway, I wanted to add more crocheting stuff in this illustration, so I drew a lace tablecloth and a coaster on the bottom of the cup. And these were really fun to draw because I was looking at stuff I actually had at home, so I didn't need any reference photos for this theme. I think it's always nice when you can incorporate your favorite things to your bullet journal theme because that makes them feel a bit more special, at least for me. If you don't like crocheting or knitting, you could always add some other things on this flat lay, like gaming or painting stuff, for example. Or you could draw something totally different in the center, or even make a cutout window type of design like I did for my February theme this year. I added some line shading in the flowers with my 005 pigma micron, and I also used that to add these horizontal lines in the table so it would have more like a wooden texture. Drawing the line art was definitely the easiest part of this illustration because I didn't exactly know which color I wanted to use for it, and I was a little bit nervous how it would turn out. I will show you a version I did when I was planning this theme, and that ended up looking a bit too colorful and even a little bit childish, I think, in some kind of way, so I ended up going with a more neutral color palette. For For the flowers, I decided to use my Crayola Colors of the World markers, which I haven't used in a while for some reason, and I definitely should use these more often as I love how light some of the colors are. I think I used the shades very light golden and light golden for the petals, and these were the perfect light yellow shades that weren't too bright. Finding the perfect colors for my illustrations is always the biggest struggle for me when I'm designing my themes, because some water-based markers are just too bright and I felt like I didn't have exactly the shades I wanted in my colored pencil collection either. I mean, I could have layered them as well, but I'm not very experienced with that yet. I've been thinking of using watercolors because of this, as then I could mix all the shades myself, but again, I don't really like painting that much and I also don't like having wrinkled paper, so markers and colored pencils it is. I would love to hear what you prefer to use in your bullet journal, and let me also know if you have any pen or marker recommendations. Anyway, I accidentally used the same light yellow shade for the wooden table, which caused a little bit of problems because I felt like the illustration had too much of the same color. I was supposed to use the shade Very Light Almond instead, because that has more of a pinkish undertone, but the markers looked very similar, so I picked up the wrong one. I built up the colors quite slowly by adding layers on top of each other, and this is my favorite way to color my illustrations, as you can't really erase water-based markers if you end up going with a too dark color. As you can probably see, I also left some spot completely white so I would get this more realistic look and wouldn't have to add that many highlights on top later. This technique works really well with flowers, especially in my opinion, as that way they end up looking a bit more interesting and not so flat. When I'm coloring with water-based markers, I also try not to lift the pen very often, so I don't get as many streaks, and this is really important, especially when I'm coloring bigger areas like the table, for example. I also try to lift the pen on areas where I'm adding shadows, as then you can't see the little darker spot that the marker leaves behind. I used a couple different shades of my Tombow dual brush pens for coloring along with colored pencils, and mixing them together worked out really well. I also decided to add some texture to the table with my colored pencils so it would look more like wood, but I actually ended up erasing that later because I felt like the table ended up looking too much of the same color and value as the flowers, so the center of the illustration didn't stand out enough. For the frame I used dark brown, and I think that gave a nice contrast to this illustration, and black probably would have been a bit too harsh. Finally, I added some highlights because I felt like I went a bit too dark with the colors of the back, for example, and this was a good way to lighten the colors a little bit. It definitely made a big difference, and this also was a good way to add some details in the coffee cup. If you don't have white gel pen yet, I highly recommend getting one, as it's really versatile and you can also use it for correcting little spelling mistakes, for example. And I think it works a lot better than a correction tape if you happen to mess up only one letter. My favorite gel pen is this Jelly Roll from Sakura, and it's the size 10. The other sizes aren't as opaque in my opinion, so I rarely use them. Anyway, now we are done with the cover page, so let's move on to the left side. I've been recently making a lot of collages in my travel journal, and I've really enjoyed it, so I wanted to make one in my bullet journal as well. By the way, I posted a new travel journal video a couple weeks ago, so definitely go watch it if you want to see more this kind of chill journaling content. For the collage, I used washi tapes from Notebook Therapy junk journal washi set that I bought a couple months ago, And I really like this set, and especially the individual flower stickers that came with it. You will see me using them later in my weekly spreads. I also used this book paste that I printed, and it's the same printable that I always use, but I just printed a black and white version of it, and I got this idea from Tina's diary as I've seen her doing that in her videos. I've been listening to a lot of Taylor Swift lately, so I wanted to write the lyrics of her song called August instead of trying to find a cheesy quote from Pinterest. I'm pretty sure that my Spotify Wrapped is going to be all Taylor Swift this year, but I'm also going to be adding some Coldplay songs to my playlists because I recently bought tickets to their concert in Helsinki next year, and I'm really excited about that. After adding this beautiful girl sticker from Dolce Vita studio, my cover spread was finally done, and now we can move on to my monthly spread. I wanted to continue my crochet/knitting theme, so I decided to draw the outlines of my calendar with this dashed line that kind of reminds me of sewing, so I thought that would fit this theme perfectly. Drawing this definitely took longer than drawing a straight line, but that was fine as this theme was really fun to set up. I had about 5.5 hours of footage, so this theme was a bit more time consuming, but you could always simplify this and just take a couple elements of it, like just the flowers for example. I drew the rest of the calendar with my Tombow dual brush pen in the shade 990 because I didn't want the calendar to take all the attention, and this way the drawings would be a bit more eye-catching. These flowers were really easy to draw, and they are quite similar to these cherry blossoms I drew on my new bullet journal setup, but this time I just drew more petals and tried to make the end of them a bit more pointy. Adding the line shading is also really easy, and the key here is to draw very loosely without trying to make a perfect line, if that makes sense. I just kind of flick the pen from the top of the petal towards the center, and I did this quite fast compared to when I'm drawing outlines. This way the shading ends up looking more organic in my opinion, and when you look at it from far away you don't pay as much attention to a little bit weird looking lines, especially after adding the colors, as you can't really see them that well. July was quite a busy month for me because I had to film my new bullet journal setup, and I was also traveling a bit, so that's why this video is again coming a bit late. At the time this video goes up, I'm actually on a little road trip to see my friend, and I'm really excited about that. I hope it doesn't rain the whole time though, as it's been very rainy lately and kind of feels like the end of summer already. I'm probably going to have one little trip in August as well, but I will try my best to film the September Plan With Me video before that, but we will see how it goes. I haven't been as consistent with my bullet journal this year for some reason, but I feel like the inspiration is slowly coming back, and I've actually used my July setup quite a lot. Sometimes you just need to take a little break, I guess. Anyway, on the bottom of the spread I again doodled some crocheting stuff and also a little coffee cup. I actually don't even drink coffee because I don't like the taste of it, and I'm also quite sensitive, so it would probably make my hands shake even more than they already do. So tea is better for me, I guess. On the right side we are making my habit tracker, and I'm using the same layout with mini calendars as always because I like the way you can see how you are doing with each habit. This time I'm not writing out my habits though, but in case you are curious, I'm probably going to track the same habits as I did in July, like vitamins, making my bed in the morning, and crocheting and knitting of course. Speaking about knitting, I actually started knitting a top and I will hopefully finish it soon so I can start wearing it. I've only knitted a top once before when I was in elementary school, and it didn't go very well because it took me years to finish as I lost interest, so I'm really excited about the fact that my new top is already over half finished. I guess you have more patience when you are older. I used the same dashed outlines for my mini calendars, which was quite tedious to draw, but I'm very happy with how they turned out. For the decorations, I drew another sunflower and also a needle with thread on the right side, and I feel like I should have added something more on the right side to make the top of the page more balanced though, but that's fine, and this is just my perfectionism speaking. Now we are making my weekly spreads, and I decided again to make some Dutch doors so I can have all my weeklies in the same spread. I decided to add this colored watercolor paper that I had on both sides for decorations, and I thought that this color went well with this theme and the sunflowers. I'm going to do some collaging for the decorations, which you will see later, and this can definitely make your journal a bit chunky over time, but I don't really mind it as chunky journals are kinda cute. As always, I'm using my corner cutter for rounding the corners, and this is one of my favorite bullet journaling tools as it's easier to get nice rounded corners this way. After I had attached the papers in place, I added this mini envelope with monthly calendar on top of the page, and I had totally forgotten that I had these mini envelopes, so that's why I decided to use one of them. I also wrote August on top of it with my Tombow fudenosuke pen, but I didn't like how it ended up looking on top of the colored paper, so I ended up covering it later. For this first spread, I decided to make my weekly overview where I will write out some things I have to get done, and usually I have made this next to my monthly spread, but I wanted to try out changing things up a little bit this time. Hopefully this will help me to be more organized with my video schedule, like it definitely has in the past. Anyway, I added the same dashed outlines for the boxes because I really like the look of them, and on the right side I decided to make a section for my monthly playlist. This is probably the second time ever that I've made a playlist page in my bullet journal, and as I've been listening to a lot more music these days, I wanted to make one just for fun. These are actually songs I've been listening to in July, but I will probably listen to them in August as well. Like I said earlier, I've been listening to a lot of Taylor Swift, and the first two songs are from the new Taylor's version of the Speak Now album, and I think both of these were new songs that were not in the original album. I've only recently became a Swiftie, so I haven't listened all of the albums yet, I think. And at the time I was filming this, I also didn't know that I got the Coldplay tickets, and if I would have known, I definitely would have written more of their songs on this playlist. For the decorations, I added a couple different kinds of papers I tore, and then I used this tracing paper trick where I just traced the flowers on my cover page and cut them to make these kinds of transparent stickers. I didn't show you how I did that in this video because it was getting really long, and you've already seen me draw these flowers, but if you would like to see how to do this, I've shown that in my previous videos, like in my new bullet journal setup. I really love the look of tracing paper on top of collages, and I think it works especially well when you have used different thicknesses for the lines. It gives quite an elegant look in my opinion, and I love how the spread turned out even though the colors were a little bit different. The bottom right corner looked a little bit empty, so I decided to add these flower stickers that came with the Notebook Therapy Junk Journal washi set, and these made the spread feel a little bit more autumnal, I guess, but August is like a fall month for me, so I liked that. I also decided to add this transparent washi tape on the side of the page, but I felt like it was a bit too much, so I took it out later. For the first weekly spread itself, I decided to go for this layout with boxes for each day, and because I'm using a smaller journal, I didn't realize that I should have cut the page to be one dot wider so I could have fit the side of the boxes. But that's fine, and I still have enough writing space, so that's all that matters. I wrote the weekdays on top of the boxes with my regular handwriting, and I love how the weekly spreads are super quick to set up when you are using this kind of drugstore weekly, because you don't have to add decorations for the weekly layouts. For the next layout, I decided to use a horizontal layout, I guess, which has 6 boxes, and I wanted to use this grid paper that I had for them, so the spread would have a bit more texture. And I also really like the look of grid paper, so I use it whenever I get the chance. This time I wrote the weekdays with a cursive font to change things up a little bit, and I was thinking of using stamps, but I was afraid that the ink wouldn't have enough time to dry up, so I didn't end up using them after all. I used some of these layouts a couple times, so I'm only showing you how I made the different layouts, but you will see all my weekly spreads in the final flip through. As you can see, I like to change my weekly layout a lot because using the same one would be a bit boring for me, and I have few go-to layouts which I like to use and change between them. This one that I'm now making, for example, is perfect for weeks when I have a lot of repeating tasks, so I don't have to write them many times. I accidentally drew the event box on top a little bit too long, so I decided to cover it up with a sticker, and this went well with my theme, even though the red made the spread feel a bit Christmassy. For my last weekly spread, I decided to use the layout with 6 boxes again, but without the grid paper, and I accidentally made a little mistake, which I covered up with a little piece of paper. Now all my weekly spreads are done, so let's move on to the last spread I made, and this is one that I haven't made in a really long time, so I decided to bring it back. This is going to be my monthly review page where I will reflect how the month has been and which things, for example, went well and which didn't. On the top I have 2 boxes, and I again used some random grid paper that I had laying around, and on these boxes I will write my successes of the month and also challenges that I faced. When I'm writing my monthly review, I mainly try to focus on the positive things, so that's why I always start with writing about the successes I had, and these can be really small things as well. In July, my biggest success was probably getting tickets for the Coldplay concert, and I was really nervous about that, but luckily they announced an extra concert and I got tickets for that. Anyway, here's the final flip through, and I would love to hear what you think of this theme. This somehow reminds me of my September and August themes last year, and I really liked that as those were some of my favorite themes last year. This is not the most cohesive theme I've done, but I don't really mind that as it was fun to do different things, and I also really enjoyed the process. Remember to leave a like and also a sunflower emoji in the comments if you enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in my next one. Bye bye!